Hi everyone, it's me again. And today we're going to do a bit of a conversational video around season 8 of Love Island USA, a show I never thought I would watch, but my coworker looped me in last year, and then a different coworker this year said, "Mika, are you watching it?" And I said, "Sure." I'm going to talk about as well the surrounding discourse around the show, and we'll see how much I can clip because Peacock scares me. So, before we get into it, links, source, ways to support the channel, all that kind of stuff, all down below, including links to my Patreon and YouTube members. I have been uploading some pretty fun, exclusive content there pretty consistently this year. My last video was still the Get Ready With Me video. I also do things like little gameplay commentary stuff sometimes, or just like some general other content or sneak peeks about things. So, thank you to my beautiful, wonderful, iconic members and patrons. Names on the screen. Finally, let's get to the pats of the video, if you will. Part 1, Bryce and Carl versus everyone else. Men, specifically. Part 2, in defense of Mackenzie, Sol, and Jen. Yeah, I'm going there. And part 3, we're going to read the Harper's Bazaar article about this, because I think that was like a pretty interesting aspect as well. So, before we completely get into it, I'm just going to do a really high-level overview of the show. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with what's going on, I imagine you wouldn't be watching this video if you had no idea what Love Island was, but regardless, some of you are very loyal to me, and I love you. What's yeah, there we go. Carl was doing this a lot. All right. So the original Islanders were, and I'm going to put on screen, this is just in general, who I'm talking about at a given time. I'm going to have their faces in the corner to make it easier to follow the different conversations that I'm having. So the original Islanders were Melanie, I'm going to do the women first and then the men. Melanie, Anaya, Trinity, Beatrice, Mackenzie, and then a girl named Vasana was dumped before the first episode aired for being racist or something. And then the men were Sincere, Casey, Zach, Bryce, and Sean. Then we have what are called bombshells, which are people that come in to stir things up. There is Kata, Gabriel, Sol, Jen, Caleb, and Corbin. And then the Casa More people who matter, because there's a lot of them. Carl, TT or Tiara, Amora, Dylan, Gall, and Parmita. And then just for funsies, there was a guy named Ronnie who was on like 2 episodes. He kind of looks Kirkified. Very funny. I couldn't get over it after my friend pointed out while we were watching it. But yeah, I'll put his picture up just so you can like read that vibe. How does the show work? You get the original 6 girls, 6 guys typically, but it seems the last few years you always lose one to a racism scandal before the show starts. Last year it was somebody named Yulissa, I believe. Ideally, you get all of these different couples and then they form on the first episode, and then you get these bombshells that come in. The point of them is to break up couples and get with one of the original people. And then you eliminate up until, I believe, week 3. Or sorry, it runs for 6 weeks. So before around week 5, 4 or 5, it depends on the season. It's always a little bit different. From there is multiple like sort of stages. So you have like the initial stage where they're meeting, the bombshells come in, blah, blah. Then what happens is they take all the remaining women in the villa. Some might be a bombshell or 2. Some might be OGs. It just depends on how it works. And then they split up the men as well. And then they subsequently put in another 6 of each. This year they did 12 men and 6 women, and then 6 of the men were eliminated after only a day or a couple hours, I think, if that, which is crazy because it's a 22-hour flight from most of the US to Fiji. So it's like 2 hours of existence in the villa for 44 hours of flights. Right. Point is, and then what happens is they bring everybody back in and they kind of see like who will remain loyal. And then you end up with typically a couple people from Casa, a couple bombshells, and mostly OGs for the most part, typically. And then you have several couples, let's say 6 to 8 maybe. And then America votes and eliminates some of the couples. America also votes somewhere in the middle to break up certain couples and put a bombshell in instead, things like that, twists and turns, reality TV, blah, blah. Now you have an idea. Let's move to part 1, Bryce and Carl versus everyone else. So this video as a whole was inspired by a TikTok that I saw early in the season that I actually reposted on my TikTok page. Don't follow me on TikTok. I don't post on there. I just don't like short form content. I post on YouTube and Twitter. That's it. Really, I'm not a big poster, unfortunately. Anywho, I'm going to clip in right now the most pertinent parts of the video just because it's 8.5 minutes long and I want you to get the gist. It will be linked in the description and it's posted by, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but Neda Teresa 98, Neidateresa 98.
As sexy as she is, she's being treated like she's not wanted, even though we know for a fact that a lot of these men want her. And why is that? It's because these men are red-pilled. We started to see the shift last year, and I was saying this back then. The reason that the show feels weird now is because these men are red-pilled. They have such a negative, low view of women, particularly women that they're attracted to, and of themselves, because that goes hand in hand with the red pill, that they cannot be seen to be putting anything on the line for a woman. It's this weird backwards thing where it's like if you desire girls too much, it's almost like that makes you quote unquote gay. But when they encounter women like Soul, who they feel attracted to, and who more importantly know how attractive they are, like it's clear that Soul knows how attractive she is. Instead of that motivating them to pursue her as it would in past generations, that motivates them to want to punish her and humble her, because how dare she believe that she is good for anything? How dare she have self-esteem? How dare she have a desire to make me look stupid by chasing after her? In previous seasons, if a girl like this had walked into the villa, we would have seen her have the opportunity to pull a bunch of men, but even the ones that she didn't pull would have gone after her to see if they could shoot their shot with her. And that's the essential thing. These men don't want to shoot a shot. They don't want to give up anything. They don't want to try in any way towards a woman, because that feels like losing power. Because there's a 50-50 chance. She could be attracted to them. She could be interested in them. She could not. They could put in a bunch of effort and she still wouldn't want them. And then how would they look? Especially on national TV. And so they focus on that possibility that she has to reject them, that little power that she wields over them, and they get mad. They're reacting from a place almost of being pre-rejected. And instead of that motivating them to step up and go harder, they decide that they're going to punish her. Because how dare she think that she can reject them, even though they didn't even try.
So in that video, right, she talks about how the men want to be chased and the men want to be valued. There's like this very red pill idea that like women are inherently only willing to go with a certain amount of men, and that they're like this, women have this evil ideology around how they want to approach men, and that in reality the men are the prize and should be chased. And also this idea that for men, that women are gold diggers and are chasing men's money, so it's like, well, if a woman doesn't want to go 50-50 with me, she's chasing my money. But then at the same time, these men want somebody who's at home, cleaning and cooking for them, while also working and providing for half, so the men just have a servant to come home to when they are done working. That's a lot of at the base of the ideology. If you want more detail on that kind of concept, I had talked about this way more in my last video, the Rhetoric of Clavicular. So that's there for you. Maybe I'll do a card or something for once, who knows. Before we get deeper into this, I want to just read a little bit of the start of chapter 6 of All About Love by Bell Hooks. So what we're doing is we're taking the performative male manual and we're using it against them as woke women. Thank you. This is the way we approach things. Now, obviously, reducing Bell Hooks to the male manipulator manual is not a good idea and is just jokes. It is just something that people have tried to, there has been a phenomenon of this particular book for some reason, of people trying to kind of like weaponize therapy speak or weaponize philosophy speak, if you will, from this book. But this book on its own is very, very good. I liked A Will to Change much more. Mind you, this one did make me cry randomly, which has never happened to me in my life. So that was definitely something. So let's read at the start of chapter 6, because this kind of talks about the way that love and ethics tie together. Awakening to love can happen only as we let go of our obsession with power and domination. Culturally, all spheres of American life, politics, religion, the workplace, domestic households, intimate relations, should and could have as their foundation have a love ethic. The underlying values of a culture and its ethics shape and inform the way we speak and act. A love ethic presupposes that everyone has the right to be free, to live fully, and to live well. To bring love ethic into every dimension of our lives, our society would need to embrace change. At the end of The Art of Loving, Erich Fromm affirms that important and radical changes are necessary if love is to become a social and not a highly individualistic, marginal phenomenon. Individuals who choose to love can and do alter their lives in ways that honor the primacy of a love ethic. We do this by choosing to work with individuals that we admire and respect, by committing to give all to our relationships, by embracing a global vision wherein we see our lives and our fate as intimately connected to those of everyone connected on the planet. Commitment to a love ethic transforms our lives by offering us a different set of values to live by. In large and small ways, we make choices based on the belief that honesty, openness, and personal integrity need to be expressed in public and private decisions. I choose to move to a small city so I can live in the same area as family, even though it is not culturally desirable as the place that I left. Friends of mine live at home with aging parents, caring for them, even though they have enough money to go elsewhere. Living by love ethic, we learn to value loyalty and a commitment to sustained bonds over material advancement. While careers and making money remain important agendas, they may never take precedent over valuing and nurturing human life and well-being. Spoiler alert, the men said we're not doing any of that, except for Bryce and Carl. This is why it is Bryce and Carl versus everyone else. This video that I had just discussed was posted very early in this season. Like, we hadn't gotten to Casa Amor yet or anything like that, okay? It is really Casa Amor where the red pill sentiments from these men got cranked to 10. The dynamic at this time was, right before Casa Amor specifically, was Sincere, who I predicted as being evil just from the image of the release of the cast. I don't know. I felt it in my bones. My evil man radar was going ding, 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 ding. And then, yeah, we clocked. Because it was funny because last year I really couldn't predict anything. So there was Sincere, who was with Melanie from the very beginning. Then a bombshell named Soul came in, who is definitely somebody who has been very controversial this season for a multitude of reasons. I talk about Soul more in part 2 specifically in that regard. So, when Soul came in, Sincere pursued her, despite being with Melanie, and despite the connection with Melanie seemingly being quite good, at least on the surface. Now, Sincere started actively pursuing Soul in secret, where he would only pull her for chats in these, like, private rooms, and then would, like, make out with her and promise that he does, in fact, want to pursue her. To which he'd walk out of that room to Melanie and then essentially tell her that she's endgame and downplay everything that happens with Soul. Meanwhile, on the other end, or on the other side, like, you know, somewhere else in the villa, we get KC, who started as a fan favorite. He very infamously opened a door on the first episode and there was no one on the other side and just wouldn't shut the hell up about that because, like, red pill men's main focus is being the prize and being picked, right? So he obviously ended up having this, like, vendetta and this personal vengeance by not being picked that day, despite the fact that Anaya was also not picked that day and they got coupled up by default. After not being chosen and being paired with Anaya, it seemed that he was diving headfirst into this connection with Anaya. He would even talk about the difficulties of around, like, black love and colorism, and would kind of talk about, like, how important black love was to him and, like, that kind of stuff. To only in turn, as the weeks went on, or the days went on rather, because it wasn't that long, just start talking crazy shit about Anaya because she wouldn't have sex with him in this room with a bunch of other people that also is recorded and posted to live television. Or, like, national television, like a streaming service or whatever. That has, like, tens of millions of viewers per episode. Right. You think the daughter of, like, a professional athlete would have no idea, you know, wouldn't have an inkling about, like, media training, perhaps? So the tipping point for truly exposing how evil, because I'm going to say evil, because that's how I feel, Sincere and KC was Casa Amor. Now, what ended up happening with this is they usually have this thing called a heart rate challenge, which is when you essentially, like, twerk on somebody, and whoever gets the people's heart rates to go up the most wins. Heart rate challenge, I'm watching like this. The last challenge they did, I couldn't, like, I looked up from my iPad, I was playing Balatro, and dry heaved. Couldn't do it. This season, we got Gooner CEO doing the challenges. It was actually insane. So essentially what ended up happening was they were getting ready for this heart rate challenge, and then, like, somebody got a text, blah, blah. And it was that the men were secretly going to Casa Amor. Then the men did the heart rate challenge, or it was like, it was the same idea as the heart rate challenge, but they didn't measure the heart rates. They didn't bother with any of that. It was just, like, the twerking of it all. They did that with the women of Casa Amor that they were meeting that minute genuinely. Okay? As that was happening, the women learned the men are gone, and they wheel in as a psychological torture tactic or something. This show is crazy. I've never seen anything like it, and I used to watch Maury. They bring the television in, like this like big TV that they have, and subsequently had the women watch the men meet these Casa Amor women, which we can imagine how well that went. Now, the men, for the most part, when they found out they were going to Casa Amor, were ecstatic, including Zach, notably, who was this is like people are talking about, like, even like the girls in the show are like, why is there so much hate with Zach? Because he was acting weird. I don't dislike him as much as the like Sincere and Casey. Like, we're just never gonna get there. We're never gonna get there. I know. I'm sorry if you think I'm wrong. Zach was weird because he was with this bombshell from the who came in like the second episode, named Kata, and he was consistently bringing up like, what if we. And as soon as you bring British accent to me, like, you know it's going to be bad. But he's like, what if there are other bombshells? Are we going to be with other people? Like, what if someone better comes in? And, like, I suppose the nature of the show, to say that, like, once, I guess, would sort of make sense. He just kept bringing it up, including when Kim and Kato were actively in this room that they essentially reserve where people pick a couple. It happens, like, 2 or 3 times a season just to go, like, bump uglies. Yeah. So they're in the ugly bumping room, and he's like, oh, well, what if I get with somebody else later? Huh? That's actually crazy. So then, Zach's all giddy along with Casey, Sincere. Caleb didn't have anybody, like a couple at this time, so it was very fine that he was happy. Corbin, who can barely string together a sentence, hello, this is a smoothie guy.
Hello, this is a smoothie.
Has been memed as like being a robot, both in the villa and on social media as the show was happening. He literally said, like, they haven't even seen these people yet. They're just figuring that there's gonna be people there, and Corbin and Casey and Sincere are essentially plotting about how they're gonna ditch the hags they came out from, because they're not as obsessed with them enough in this like weird way, when maybe they'd be more into you if you respected them as people a little bit. Crazy thought. Corbin literally being like, my connection with Kenzie is over. Like, I've been Corbin impersonating for months. Kenzie. Like, I can't stop doing it. Oh, man. And one of the most infamous lines in the whole show is Corbin talking to KC and going, the Villa girls are like high school girls. The Casa girls are like college girls. Saying that essentially the women in the villa were playing games with them, while the women in Casa Amor weren't, because the women in Casa Amor were actively pursuing them.
I don't want to be mean, but I feel like TT and Parmita are like college girls. Yeah. And those girls in the villa are like high school girls. Me and I was talking last night, and we were just like, what the fuck, right?
Now, let's remember that the Villa girls that are established, have their own reputations, have their own connections with the audience, and have the same, like, solid status of the Villa as these men do. But these women have to are only going to stay in if they're better than the connection that had been going on for likely weeks by this point. That's how Casa Amor works, right? So obviously these women are put in the most. Girl, there's $100,000 prize, $78,700 after taxes apparently, which is so funny because I live in the like what feels like the taxation capital of the world, but for some reason Canada, you don't get taxed on prize money like that. It's like the only tax exempt thing that exists, it feels like. Anyway, what was interesting to analyze about this was that the main point of excitement with these men was often the fact that the women had to pursue them so much. Not like the opportunity to meet other people, not like in the way of like actually knowing them in any capacity. It was like, I'm now the prize finally. I've always been the prize, even though all I'm doing is disrespecting these women, but they should unconditionally value me because I'm a man and they want to be in a romantic partnership. Because I want a woman just for the sake of being with one. Because that's really what it is. The only man that was not particularly content with going to Casa Amor was Bryce, who had been in a couple with Trinity since the first episode. He gave it somewhat of a shot in like the first challenge and then proceeded to just spiral for the whole week for being without Trinity, who he was in a couple with from the very beginning. It resulted in a bunch of memes of pictures of Bryce looking really sad to be without Trinity. And they actually, many of the Islanders, when they came off, like when they were done the show, because it finished a week ago today, they were very excited to post pictures of Bryce being emo during Casa Amor. But anyway, this is where Bryce separated himself from the rest of the men, showing that he valued his actual like connection with somebody that he made a point to talk about his life with, to inquire about like how she feels about things and her needs and her wants, and would adjust his behavior to fit her needs and her wants, like somebody who's into someone should do in general. And it wasn't him constantly being like, well, I want to be chased. I need to feel validated in the way that you will do things that you wouldn't normally do in order to be with me, which is just kind of violating the agency of the women. Now, someone pointed out, and I'm really sad that I did not save it, but someone brought up the way that the Casa Amor men approach the women versus the Casa Amor women approaching the men. And they talked about how the Casa women just approach the men by being like, I'll put out for you. That was the vibe. Not necessarily saying that that's what they were doing, but they were like really, really overtly sexual and really, really willing to like make out and like do all the stuff that a lot of the other women were like, well, I'd like to wait 5 minutes, please. And then the Casa men were like, let me talk to each of the women and figure out like who I want to kind of chat with and who I kind of want to get to know. And that's why a lot of these, and that was like the way that they were perceiving they could win over the women from the show. Now, one thing to note too is that the Casa Amor men are able to watch the first 2 weeks. Like, it's just like they get in so much later, they can watch the show. So what's interesting is that these men knew, they picked up on the behavior of the other men and went interpersonally, these men are dogs and are not like, hit the mic, are not like getting the memo. Okay. So I'm going to talk to them like people as the means of getting them. While the women are like, all these men want is a hunk of meat, so that's all I gotta do. That worked on KC, that worked on Corbin, and it worked on Sincere, but he knew, I think, that he couldn't get even close to winning if he dished Melanie, and unfortunately, I think he also knew that he could sort of dog walk Melanie until movie night. This changed after movie night, which movie night is another psychological experiment they do on these poor people, where all these moments that are put on television that we see that the other people don't see of each other, like confessionals and like the private room stuff, Dr. Pepper Needle, Ice Cube, by the way, if you're wondering, they get to watch together. They pull that TV again, the psychological torture machine TV, into the room, and they watch each other's stuff. Now, my neighbors are my besties. I have no neighbors that I don't know. I kind of love how I did that. I don't know how that happened, but anyway. The way if I had neighbors that didn't know me, the cops would have been called on me that day. I was hooting and hollering. KC had 13 minutes of clips of him being evil. Somehow Sincere perceived as more evil, which was interesting because I kind of think KC's worse. But KC, who calls Anaya a grandma for not putting out, by the way.
Well, I mean, and I ain't done shit.
Grandma. As soon as the lights turn off, bro, all I see is man like this.
That's what I'm saying.
The confessionals were particularly eye-opening, as per design. And you have KC talking about how much better TT was because he could speak life into her. I still don't really know what that means. Does that mean like bumping up? Like, I don't know what that means. Somebody in the comments, please help me. Anyway, I never knew what that meant. I thought it meant like I just do whatever I want with her. I'm not really sure. Anyway, I've never heard that saying in my life. Too old-timey for me, perhaps. But he said specifically that he got in 3 days from TT what he couldn't get in 3 weeks with Anaya, which means TT put out. So he directly says, this woman is better because she'll put out when I want, unlike the other bitch. And then when Casey and TT get eliminated because they're dogs, TT's also kind of evil. Literally watching the movie night clips of Casey dogging on Anaya, okay? Like this. I love when men are evil if they pick me. Oh, Chris. God, I would be I would be eliminated in an hour just because I'd be ripping into everybody. Well, not in the BMI that I got going on, but that's besides the point. I would be psychological torture machine towards those men. Because I can't, like, hell no. Like, I run a tight ship up here, okay? Trust. While this was happening, as in Casey doing these confessionals by being like, that girl putting out for me, that's a real woman. You get Anaya and Carl essentially having, like, a borderline fairy tale fantasy arc where Carl's, like, super interested in her. He's super, like, attentive and he's sweet. He's also, like, gigantic and ripped, which obviously helps. And because I think, like, Anaya's, like, 5'9" or 5'10", and he, like, towers over us. He got, like, 6'6" or something crazy. But anyway, it is so sad because when they did the recoupling, when they bring everybody back together, like I mentioned before, Anaya still thinks she has to be loyal to evil man, Casey, doesn't pick Carl, and then Casey comes back with TT. Sit down, my name's TT. Tweet, bird. Get out of here. See. Boom. This show got me fired up, especially with Casey. Like, last year, my op was Ace. It's the ugly back tattoos. I swear to God, it's like binding all the souls together or some shit. Last year, my op was Ace. I hated Ace the most of everyone. Conniving. Evil. And people didn't see it as much as me. Some of you are still wrong. Ace and Huda. Like, last season, like, I hated last season. I would like skip through like Huda's crash outs and Ace being manipulative and crazy. Okay, like they're both evil. Yeah, I would just skip. You don't need to talk, Ace. Sit down. Ace, look me in the eyes because you can. I'm 5'4", by the way. But yeah. So then Carl doesn't get picked by Anaya, and Casey chooses other women. I know the producers were like, no, we can't be having this. We cannot have this much psychological torture on this show. Or like, I don't know, some government agency's going to shut us down, okay? So what they do is, this year, which they did not do last year to what I remember, they let people vote to bring 2 people from Casa Amor back. So they brought, which, by the way, I didn't even mention in my script. I forgot to write it. I didn't. So Sincere does the soul thing again with this girl named Amora, where he's like making out with her all the time, being like, yeah, you're a connection I want to pursue, blah, 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 but then still picks Melanie because, you know, he can go back to her always and she'll always take him back. That seems to be what was going on. I know a lot of people are going to be upset by how much I kind of blow Melanie off. When your mom and sister are crying that you cannot keep doing this, and you watch him be evil to you for weeks, like, I can't cut it. I was off of the Melanie. I never really liked Melanie, unfortunately, because I was off the Melanie train at like 2 days into Sincere. I was like, no. I was an Anaya truther the whole time, period, as I should be, because she picked one of the only decent men to ever go through that bitch. Okay, boom. They vote to bring Amora, the girl that Sincere was courting in Casa Amor, back, and they vote to bring back Carl via a cake in front of Megan Thee Stallion. And it's so, what the craziest part about with these men too was, like, they were so full of themselves and so sure that they were a prize that they talked to Megan Thee Stallion, bro. Megan Thee Stallion, one of the most gorgeous people alive. Rich as hell. Platinum records, singles, Grammys, Broadway, perfume, tequila, swimsuits, bus, club, another club, girl, hot girl summer. Like, it's... At one point, Corbin goes, barely stringing the sentence together, got to put all 3 gigahertz of the CPU together, going, "You like my shit though," to Megan, and she's like, "No." As she should, thank God. And then at one point, Megan says to KC, "Hey, like, people are this pissed off at you because of how disrespectful you were to Anaya by, like, essentially being like, she didn't put out, so I hate her," kind of thing. And then he goes, tries to give her attitude like the 12-year-olds I used to teach would do to me when I'm like, "You didn't do your homework. It was crazy." He's like, "How was I disrespectful?" And then Meg goes, "I watched all of Casa More, Goofy."
Could have pursued TT without being disrespectful to Anaya.
Exactly.
How was I being disrespectful?
You don't remember nothing that happened to Casa?
I've been a hottie since 2019, y'all, and that's like, I picked a good stand. I am essentially a Charlie XCX Megan Thee Stallion Twitter fan account at this point, bro. It's like those two I'm fighting for. It's actually crazy. I screamed at my television when he gave lip to Megan Thee Stallion, bro. Like, my dream is to, like, breathe the same air as that woman in any capacity ever, let alone talk shit to her. Are you stupid? Well, are you stupid? Hello, this is a smoothie. I don't think he's very smart. Now, Sincere operates in a way that's, like, particularly evil, and I want to read another section of this out loud because I saw this page and was absolutely flabbergasted because it's so true. The way that this is how Sincere operated. It was actually kind of nuts. Males learn to lie as a way of obtaining power, and females not only do the same, but they also lie to pretend to have powerlessness. In her work, Harriet Lerner talks about the way in which patriarchy upholds deception, encouraging women to present a false self to the men and vice versa. In Dory Hollander's 101 Lies Men Tell Women, she confirms that both women and men lie. Her data and the findings of other researchers indicate that men tend to lie more and with more devastating consequences. Right? So, instead of lying about necessarily, how you entertain somebody or anything like that, he's like, "I'm not really doing anything, Minna. I'm in it with you," while he's like, literally like sucking the mouth of another girl 5 minutes before. For many young males, the earliest experience of power over others comes from a thrill of lying to more powerful adults and getting away with it. Lots of men share with me that it was difficult for them to tell the truth that they saw that it would hurt a loved one. And that was a big issue with Sincere as well, because he'd entertain these women because he's just not thinking and he's being selfish, but then have to go back and answer to Melanie. Significantly, the lying many boys learn to do is to avoid hurting mom or whoever becomes so habitual that it becomes hard for them to distinguish a lie from the truth. This behavior carries over into adulthood. Often men who would never think of lying in the workplace lie constantly in intimate relationships. This seems to be especially the case for heterosexual men who see women as gullible. This is what I mean when I say that he always kind of goes back to Melanie. Powder on my nose is getting into my nose, sorry. And like the implications that brings, right? To understand why male lying is more acceptable in our lives, we have to understand the way in which power and privilege have accorded to men simply because they're males within a patriarchal culture. The very concept of being a man and a real man has always implied that when necessary, men can take action that breaks the rules and that they are above the law. Patriarchy tells us daily through movies, television, and magazines that men of power can do whatever they want, and that this freedom is what makes them men. This message given to males is often that to be honest is to be soft, and the ability to be dishonest and indifferent to the consequences makes a male hard and separates them from boys. So now that we have a context of how Sincere was acting as evil as Sincere was, let's just quickly talk about my defense of some of the women on the show. Part 2, in defense of Kenzie. Mackenzie, Jen, and Sol, okay? So, Jen and Sol were bombshells. Mackenzie was an OG, okay? Now, Mackenzie has been an incredibly controversial figure this season. Mainly for the way that she sampled every man in that show, which is interesting because she was just playing the game. Now, what's interesting is I've noticed that somebody made a Love Island USA Season 8 U.S. record for most connections to Kenzie, where it shows that she had connection with Zach, Sean, Gabriel, Corbin, Caleb, Dylan, and Gall. What doesn't make sense to me is that Sincere had Amora, Sydney, Melanie, Sol, and would have had many others if not for them not liking him either. Okay? So Sincere had 4. And giving Mackenzie 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 is a humongous stretch. She had 1 conversation with Zach, 1 conversation with Caleb, or 2, and Gall. So, like, she kissed one of these people, like, at least, like, once or whatever. Her only actual, like, connections that she put any effort into were Sean, briefly Gabriel, Corbin, and Dylan, which is the same amount as Sincere, if there's 4, okay? Now, obviously, I'm doing a little bit of dodging, I'm doing a little bit of whatever. What the point I'm trying to make is Kenzie didn't go through these connections constantly going back to one person throughout the whole time and manipulating them. She was pursuing connections, and then when a man would be shit to her, Zach was mean to her, Corbin dumped the connection immediately, Gabriel blew her off as soon as Jen showed up, Zach and Gabriel, and then Corbin blew her off for Casa Moore, and Gall was just too brief, okay? She didn't have somebody constantly on the back burner. She had in and out kind of thing with Dylan, and that was only the last, like, week. And somebody comments, Zach, Sean, and Gabriel and Gall don't even count, which I agree with. I say Sean kind of counts, but I understand the sentiment, right? The flack that Kenzie's getting for doing this versus Sincere for lying to everyone, I just really think is the misogyny of it all. Now, I don't like Kenzie really much either because I just thought she's kind of annoying. Like, I just didn't like her personality that much. But I can still separate that and be like, no, that's not how that should have worked. Okay? Because Kenzie had the willingness to face rejection, which is something that people notably talked about with Bryce when he briefly tried to pursue Kate. And Kenzie had a sense of self that was really strong. And when a man would slide her, it's over. Zach slided her, get out. Corbin, get out. And she was mean as Corbin, which I lived for. Okay? What put her at this being contentious with these men is also something that will be the final reading in All About Love. Okay? Women, more so than men, rush out to purchase literature. This is talking about, like, feminist literature and, like, literature about love and stuff. We do so because collectively we are concerned about lovelessness. Since many women believe that they will never know fulfilling love, they are willing to settle for strategies that help ease the pain and increase the peace, pleasure, and playfulness in existing in relationships, particularly romantic ones. No vehicle in our culture exists for readers to talk back to the writers of this literature. And we do not really know if it has been truly useful. If it promotes constructive change, the fact that women, more than men, buy self-help books are using our consumer dollars to find specific books on the bestseller list and have no indication if they'll actually help or transform our lives. We have bought tons of self-help books, only few have really made a difference, and this is true for many readers. The lack of an ongoing public discussion and public policy about practicing love in our culture and in our lives means that we still look to books as a primary source of guidance and direction. I just want to skip a little bit, too, to a more relevant part. To begin by always thinking of love as an action rather than a feeling is one way in which anyone using the word in this matter automatically assumes accountability and responsibility. We are often taught that we have no control over our feelings, yet most of us accept that we choose our actions. That intention will inform what we do. We also accept that our actions have consequences. To think of actions as sharp feelings is the only one way that we rid ourselves of conventionally accepted assumptions, such as that parents love their children, or that one simply falls in love without exercising will or choice, and that there's such things as crimes of passion. For example, he killed her because he loved her so much. If we were constantly remembering that love is what love does, we would not use the word in a manner that devalues and degrades its meaning. When we are loving, we openly, honestly express care, affection, responsibility, respectiveness, commitment, and trust. Definitions are vital starting points for the imagination in which what we cannot imagine cannot come into being. A good definition marks our standing point and lets us know where we want to end up. As we move toward a desired destination in the journey, creating a map. We need a map to guide us on our journey to love, and starting with the place that we know and what we mean and what it means to love. Now, what this is talking about is that women tend to search more in their connections and are more into, like, buying these self-help books and trying to kind of, like, gauge the direction of their lives. What I'm talking about in terms of Kenzie in this aspect is this idea that she does not try to just be a victim of her actions. And one thing that was notable is that in the movie night, they had played clips of her pursuing all these men to kind of try to make her look bad. And it was supposed to be sort of positioned in the same way as, like, Sincere. And the men that have marbles in their brains are like, this is Zach in particular. This is because he just has a vendetta against her. I think it was mostly what it was. And they begin talking about this double standard. Also because they played clips of Anaya and Carl and Casa. And they're like, well, everyone hates that KC got a Casa girl. Yes, but she explored in the way that she was supposed to, and then was still loyal to Casey in the end. That's the big distinguishing difference. And also, Anaya wasn't making out with Carl and being like, man, Casey's a bitch, am I right? So, very different things. Kenzie, unlike the men that were having these clips shown about them in general, was genuinely apologetic and had felt bad for what had happened in the way that she had hurt people's feelings. Now when we talk about Jen and Sol, who came in as bombshells, they sort of lacked the need of this like male attention. And bombshells are supposed to be pursued by the men. But when they both got in, a lot of these men felt that, I feel like that they had ties or control over the women that they were with and just remain with them in their couples. A lot of them kind of giving they wanted to stay in as long as possible for relevance and potentially winning the money. That's kind of how I feel. When we talk about that TikTok too, it was centered around the fact that Sol knew how attractive she was. And I think this was like the first time that like somebody too sexy beautiful came into Love Island and it broke everybody's brains. Sol tried to play the game, picked who she wanted to pursue, but then was also respectful to Sincere to not consistently pursue other men because he said he was interested in her. Only for her to get dogged on by everyone for trying to steal someone's man, which you went on Love Island for Christ's sake, that is the point, and just get maliciously treated by the men talking shit about her, the women kind of being cold to her, and she only lasts a couple episodes to leave to say that she's been put out of her misery.
I'm not surprised. Everyone was closed off when I came in here, so y'all are putting me out my misery, so thank you. If anything. It's like Couples Island in here. I'm glad you guys found your person. I just feel like I came too late to the game, so.
Jen was called Nothing Burger for a long time because she would try to pursue people, and then when she would be disrespected, she would just leave it there, and eventually just got tired of all the men in general. Jen was also particularly antagonistic towards men that she thought were acting particularly badly. In this sense, Corbin and Sincere. Famously saying, what was it? You pretend that you're honest, but you're insincere or something, and then put a pie in Sincere's face, which was really epic and based.
I know you're sincere, but you're not honest.
Jen, I lived for the whole time because she didn't take shit from anybody. That's my queen. I love somebody like that. I love Jen. As soon as Jen started having like more screen time and more testimonials and stuff, I was like, yeah, that's my queen. And I knew she wasn't going to win because she was, I guess, slightly less skinny or something. I don't know. People talked about her like she was unattractive. I really don't know what they were talking about. But it's interesting that the women that refused to take the dog walking from these men, outside of Anaya, because she happened to have found one of two men on that island that were willing to deal with a woman that didn't take shit, they're villainized. And I think it's something to reflect on, and I think saying it is misogyny, while some people would say this is like reducing it, this is one of those times where I think that's what's happening. Because especially with the women that felt like they had less dependency on the security of the show. Now, let's do a quick reading of the Harper's Bazaar article and conclude the video. All right, so let's read this here article. It is titled, What Love Island USA Says About Today's Dating Gender Wars. Season 8 of the wildly popular show saw a troubling descent into male supremacist behavior and a satisfying rejection of it, which it just went on and on and on about for like 40 minutes. Warning, major spoilers. Yes, my video's all spoilers too, as you know. At the end of Sunday night's finale of Love Island USA Season 8, it came to no surprise when a 22-year-old Trinity Tatum and 30-year-old Bryce Detloff were announced as the winners after being voted America's favorite couple. After all, theirs was a swoon-worthy love story, a slow burn friends to lovers fairy tale where both parties took their time establishing a romantic connection that, in the end, resulted in one of the season's only true boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. Across the season, Trinity rose through the ranks and become a bona fide fan favorite. Right now, she's the only Season 8 Islander whose Instagram followers have surpassed 2 million mark. And Bryce, with his lost puppy-like effect, did plenty to warm the hearts of America. But the win felt expected precisely because the pair's loving relationship was such an outlier on an otherwise bleak season. Love Island, a show where endless stream of men and women couple and recouple in the eventual hopes of finding the one, has never been the pinnacle of respect for women. Yeah. Yes, last season with the way they treated Alandria on the show. Oh! I was an Alandria truther too. There's something about a runner-up that I just live for. Anyway. But on season 8, it felt as if there were new levels of male chauvinism that had taken root inside the villa. And as cast members like Casey Chandler, Sincere Rhea, Corbin Mims, and Zach Georgiou were shown treating their female co-stars with blatant misogyny, it felt the show was mirroring our continually devolving heterosexual dating landscape. If reality TV offers a window into our collective psyche, this one allowed an undeniable rise in male entitlement and deepening rift between the genders and offered a rare opportunity to reject it. This is what I was talking about when I was talking about the way that the men perceived the women's clips in movie night, the way that they felt entitled to the women's bodies, and they were like mean to the women if they wouldn't put out, stuff like that. Love Island USA is a spin-off of the UK decade-plus running Love Island. It is trash TV at its most addicting. Unique for its quasi-real-time airing, where viewers watch events that played out just a day or two before, the series has grown into a true water cooler juggernaut over its last few seasons, reliably drawing viewers in the millions despite airing 6 new episodes each week. Every day but hump day goes a familiar saying. Yeah, Saturday they have like a thing called After Sun. It would be easy to credit the show's popularity to its embrace of petty drama, crash-out fights, and bottomless supply of hot 20-somethings, but Love Island USA also stands out for its appeal to audience participation, where viewers get to feel a part of the show by casting votes that directly impact who gets to stay, who is forced to leave, and eventually who wins the $100,000 prize. I tried to watch a bit of the UK one. I think one thing I want to say too, I like about particularly about Love Island USA, is that this is a lot more culturally diverse. I kind of feel like the UK one a lot of the time is the same 12 people with like bad spray tans, just like copy pasted a bunch of times. But you get a lot of different socioeconomic statuses. You get a lot of different cultural statuses, or sorry, like cultural experiences that bring a lot to the show. Like you had Gabriel, an immigrant to the United States of like less than 2 years, who was like just learning English, for example. Like it's like stuff like that that I thought was quite interesting. There's King Carl right there. For the uninitiated, the Peacock original series follows a relatively simple structure. Each season kicks off with a group of OG Islanders, usually equal number of men and women, who immediately couple up based on challenges and one-on-one chats meant to test chemistry and compatibility. As the season progresses, producers send in bombshells, enter the villa, hope to build a connection. I'm just reading this fast because I already went over this. With one of the already coupled up, occasionally cast members are given the opportunity to stay paired or ditch them for someone new. Any Islander not a couple is declared single and vulnerable at risk of being dumped from the island. Which is to say, in its purest form, Love Island has always necessitated some form of continuous exploration, as it's called on the lingo-dense show. Though its ostensibility, about finding love, the series has never lent itself to any deal of strict monogamy. Even the challenges themselves, where kissing, touching, grinding, and exchanging any number of bodily fluids, with people outside of one's current couple is par for the course, are deliberately sexualized by design. Lascivious? I think that's how you say that. But exploration doesn't have to entail disrespect, and that is where the men and women of season 8 seem to be ideologically split. This is what I was talking about, right? Kenzie versus Sincere. Okay, lock in, y'all. Take Casa Amor, a 2-day test period where the coupled up Islanders are separated by gender and introduced to a new set of potential partners. It is a time where exploration is not only courage, it's expected. This season, the women entertain new connections while also being mindful of the bonds they already built. Meanwhile, nearly all the men threw caution to the wind at the first chance they got. There was Corbin asserting that he is going back with somebody different before he'd even had a real conversation. There was Sincere, barely recovered from the messy love triangle he previously formed with Melanie Marino and Sol Dean, lying that like he was paid to do it. Casey made a petulant comment during one of the challenges about how the girls are really giving all those Casa guys at the villa what we should have been getting, while Corbin joked about how the women in Casa felt like college girls compared to the high school girls he had previously been coupled up with. Though these were all adult men, seemingly they were the ones behaving like high school boys in a locker room. While it may not have been apparent to the Islanders in the villa, from the outside looking in, it was impossible to separate the manner in which these men talked to women from red-pilled manosphere logic that, thanks to personalities like Clavicular, ding ding, I talked about him in the last video, has extended far beyond the reaches of right-wing circles to infiltrate even the most mainstream online spaces. In the last few weeks, there has been significant online chatter about this, even The View dedicated a segment discussing it. Whether directly or indirectly, many of today's young men, which Love Island, mostly early 20-somethings, definitely qualifies as, have been shaped by an increasingly pervasive anti-feminist philosophy that paints them both as the prize and as the victim. Women should constantly be trying to earn men's love, and if not, they're blocking them from reaching their full alpha potential. And to establish their position at the top of the food chain, men are encouraged to follow a set of guidelines, almost all of which involve the mistreatment and disrespect of women. I did not read this, by the way, until just now. I just want to make that clear. These behaviors could be spotted all season. Casey's constant need to bring up the fact that he wasn't chosen by any of the women Islanders in the first challenge as justification for his future philandering mirrors across incel victim logic. Zach's habit of withholding affection from his partner, Kata Boss, when he was annoyed, like refusing kisses or threatening to not cook her breakfast as some form of punishment, felt like textbook emotional manipulation. Even when the contestants were speaking about people they supposedly wanted to be with, the red flags couldn't be ignored. Sincere spent the finale praising Melanie for being so patient and resilient, celebrating his partner's willingness to repeatedly forgive his transgressions. And Casey, explaining his reasoning for wanting Tiara TT Davis, his girlfriend, noted how she has literally shown me she's worthy to be my girl. Ugh, yeah, that line gave me the heebie-jeebies. But the most egregious example of this has been thoroughly dissected was movie night, when edited clips of individual Islanders were broadcast to the entire villa, revealing private conversations and clandestine encounters to the wider cast. As is bound to happen, both the men and women were exposed for less than flattering conduct behind closed doors, and both sides responded in turn. But the men's insistence that they were the victims of double standard, when the women chastised them for how they explored, namely things that they said behind their partners' backs, revealed a fundamental misunderstanding about the gravity of their actions. Sure, Anaya Harvey may have swooned over Carl Lee Schmidt, my king. There's Carl there. Like, it's funny too, because when they're like, you could just see how, like, it's like, ew! But unlike KC, she did not go with a name calling, as KC did when he labeled her a grandma for not wanting to be intimate yet. For many of the men, being given free rein to test their chemistry with new women wasn't enough. They had to disparage the women they were previously coupled up with to justify their actions. This isn't meant to be screed across the men. One can't ignore the outlier case of Kenzie Annis, who at 2 different points during the season was entertaining 2 different men at the same time, while telling both parties what they wanted to hear, whether or not it was actually true. But while Kenzie was relatively quick to apologize and take accountability when called out, many of the men initially refused to admit wrongdoing, exposing their own entitled double standard. I also think, like, she wasn't nearly as in deep with anyone that she was kind of going back and forth with. Well, which I think, like, while obviously not ideal, it makes a big difference. Of course, nothing is true for everyone, and that's why Sunday night's finale results felt like a bright light at the end of the very dark 36-episode tunnel. After a frustrating season of overt misogyny playing out, America's decision to reward a couple whose love story felt aspirational, and, more consequentially, a man whose behavior didn't feel inspired by Andrew Tate's how-to guide, represented a conscious repudiation, good lord, of the MRA-inspired rhetoric that seemed to inflict almost every other man in the villa. By all means, Bryce represented... I don't have my glasses on, sorry y'all. When I read when I don't immediately recognize a word, I'm like, ooh. Affected by every man in the villa. By all means, Bryce represented the platonic ideal of modern-day manhood. Sensitive, emotional, gentle, and caring. For what it's worth, reality TV has long been a culprit of normalizing bad behavior. From Real Housewives to Real World, The Bachelor, and even the Traitors, the medium has always thrived on people behaving at the worst. And yet, Love Island USA has this lively online discussion and discourse depends on audience interaction and has arguably evolved into something different. An opportunity to really examine, in minute detail, the highs and lows of modern social dating dynamics. Given America's power to not only express their opinions in real time, but have a say in what type of behavior gets to persist on the screen, flips the dynamic on its head. And it's the way that America tried to break up Melanie and Sincere so many times, and Melanie never considered that it would be maybe because Sincere is evil and people can see that and she can't. There's something satisfying in the small agency, even if it won't do much to eradicate the real world rise. If nothing else, watching Bryce and Trinity jump hand in hand into the pool after winning offered a much needed glimpse of hope. The manosphere might have changed the landscape of modern dating, but perhaps it's still possible to find the one. I will say too, Carl and Anaya placed second, and that was another couple that was like not a manosphere hellscape. So that is also something that made me feel happy. Was I think Zach and Kata should have been third, and then Melanie Cecilia at fourth place, but you can't have it all. Anyway, let's conclude the video. To conclude, we talked about the evil happenings of the men in this season. We talked about the bombshells and the issue of not wanting to chase the men. We talked about the misogyny in the audience response to things. And we read the Harper's Bazaar article that I think really put a nail on the head on some of my feelings. Links, sources, ways for the channel, all that kind of stuff, all down below, including YouTube members and patrons. There's also an email to suggest content. Thank you, every single one of you, for listening to my long rant. And I hope all of you have an amazing day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.
Mate, I'm praying to God at the back of the church.